Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17. Please turn there. And we want to talk to you and bring the word today into a reality. Now, you know, the word is in the spirit, and we have to learn to bring it into the earth realm. Amen. And I'm going to read a little bit of it to you so that you can follow kind of what we're looking at here. Paul the apostle here, give you a little background, is walking through a place called Athens. And he's walking through Athens, and his spirit is provoked. And it's filled with agitation. And how many of you know that people can get agitated if they're in the spirit and they're discerning wicked spirits? That's what he was doing here. He was picking up a demonic spirit that's present, and he got activated. I'm here. I get activated when I come in church sometimes. There's people that come in and they bring demonic spirits with them, and it activates me. Hello. Paul is in that situation. There's a woman that's going around, and she is just, boy. It says in verse 16, his spirit was grieved and roused to anger as he saw the city full of idols. Have you hear that? In Acts 17, if you look at that, you'll see it. And he comes into a situation where he says some things that are absolutely profound. And he said in verse 23, "For I passed along and carefully observed your objects." Now he's talking to these Grecians, to these people that are Greeks who are worshiping idols. And he says, "For I passed along and carefully," not at a glance, not just kind of blow by it. He really was focused, and he was there because God put him there. How many of you know sometimes we miss the greatest moments in our life because we're not focused? And he carefully observed, he said, "I carefully observed your objects of worship." When you go into a place, a city, you can tell what they worship. "I came also upon an altar," he said, "with this inscription." He said, "I found this altar, and it said, 'To the unknown God.'" To the unknown God. How do you know a lot of people worship an unknown God in the church? Hello? Because they don't know who they worship. They don't know who Jesus is. They'll tell you they worship God, but they don't know Jesus. Now, what you are already worshiping as unknown, this I set forth to you. So Paul said, I'm going to clear it up for you. You declare you worship an unknown God. I'm going to introduce you to the God that you really should be worshiping. Amen. And the God who produced and formed the world, he goes into a oration of description of the God that he served. How many of you know you and I need to share Christ with people, but we must share the reality of how awesome God is and how magnificent God is. Amen. Come on. And you can't do that by just telling people that God saved you. You know, God might have saved you because he felt sorry for you. But you need to define to people how awesome and how magnificent and how just ever all things God is. Omnipotent, omniscient. God is everywhere at all times. And so Paul does that. A God who produced and formed the world and all things in it, being Lord of heaven and Lord of the earth, and does not dwell in handmade shrines. Then he says in verse 25, "Neither is he served by human hands, as though he lacked anything. For it is he himself who gives life and breath and all things to all people. And he made from one common origin, one source, one blood, all nations of men to settle on the face of the earth, having definitely determined their allotted periods of time." and the fixed boundaries of their habitation, their settlements, lands, and abodes, so that they should seek God in the hope that they might feel after him and find him, although he is not far from each of us. And Paul uses a term in verse 27 there, that you should seek God that you might feel after him. That it means that the God that you're looking for is not in the man's hands of idols of stone made, but he's an invisible God. And he's not talking about feel like if you feel like it, feel. He's talking about if you'll move past your natural origins of, taste and smell and all that, and move into the realm of seeing in the Spirit and seeing that God is really who he says he is. And so Paul is really defining some things that is probably going over their heads. God is a God who wants to be known by a people. And we live in a day and an earth where we have people around us in every corridor that don't know him. They talk of him, they talk against him, but they don't know him. And so Paul was defining that. Now, I want to read verse 26 in this ESV translation. You see it on the board, I hope. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. That's where all of us came from. From one man, Adam, and made every nation of mankind to live. So I don't care where you go back to check your roots on one of those programs that you can find out your heritage. But I'm going to tell you what it'll do. It's going to take you back that we all came from Adam. All have sinned. We all came from Adam. And that should blow up all of our pitty-ante little divisions that make us want to identify with our tribe and reject every other tribe. You're rejecting your brother. You're rejecting your sister. You're rejecting people that are really yours. And he says here, he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods. Now, I read to you a minute ago, had determined allotted times. Have you here? Times oftentimes get lost in biblical understanding because we realize that a lot of the Bible is not based on a chronos, that thing on your wrist. It is based on a kairos, which is a bigger clock of eternal time by a creator. But I want you to see that he also has determined allotted periods. How do you know that every one of us has an allotted period of time? We have been given an allotted period of time. I'm going to show you something today. The Godhead that we had a meeting yesterday with some leaders, and we talked about how the Godhead, the Trinity of God, it's referred to as when they're together, when they're converging in the dialogue of heaven, it becomes a circle, it becomes a swirl, a dance, and a rotation. And how many of you know that everything God made is moving? The earth is spinning and the revolutions that it goes around, and we've talked about the revolutions that the sun, the orbits of the planets going around the sun is 70,000 kilometers per second. It's going like mad. How many of you know when they go out to planets like Mars, they're traveling at 200, 300,000 miles an hour. They're booking. And everything God made is in a turn. When you look at the space, it is moving in a elliptical sphere, which means it's rotating in a spiral, and the sun is moving, and the planets are collecting up behind it, and they're following it, and it's a marvelous thing to understand. The earth moves, the stars are moving, everything God created is moving. The ocean's moving, the clouds are moving. Man's supposed to be moving. When man isn't, he's dead. Plants, they move. Animals move. The earth is shaking. It moves. So God is a God of moves. And so, having determined allotted periods of time for every one of us, and what Paul's talking to these Grecians now, he's telling them something. And he said also, he set the boundaries of their dwelling place. God set their boundaries, meaning how far he would let them go. Now let me help you. He's not talking about a geographical spot of land. Because if he had mentioned California, the Greeks wouldn't have known what he was talking about. If he'd have mentioned Mexico, the Greeks would not have known what he was talking about. But he's saying here, I've set the boundaries. Hello? I've set the boundaries. Those boundaries are how far God will let you go in your pursuit, in your development, in your pursuit of him, in your pursuit of your purpose. God sets a boundary around you that will either allow you to extend or be limited. Can you get this? So stay with me now. I'm going to help you. And so when we look at this, and he says, we go a little further, and that they should seek God. Those that he gave an allotted time, and he set their boundaries. He said it so they should set themselves to seek God. In other words, I put man on the earth. I made man out of one man. I created the earth. I created the world. I created everything, and I made the man, and I gave him allotted times that he could be on the earth coming at the right time. Now that's the key there. The reason I shifted to this verse, to this the way this one is presented, is because I want you to get a distinction here about setting you in the right time. You and I were in the mind and loins of God before there ever was. And God held you for a time. Esther had a revelation of God. She said, I must be born for such a time. Hello. And you and I need to get a real grip on this, that we were born for a time. You were born to be alive in 2018. But you were available in 1718. You were available in 518. But God held it up. Because God is so awesome, when he made you, he just put it there in the place of his mind, had your name on it, and stuck it there and froze it and went right around it and put everybody in the place they needed to be. And then he comes to these Grecians and he says, you're here because God set the time for you to be here. But he gave a boundary to you, and if you get out of the boundary, he said, that's when I'm going to take you. You still here? So let's read the rest of it and get on to the next part. That they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him. Perhaps you'll find your way through the darkness of this world till you find your way in God and light comes on. Because in the journey of life, you don't know where God is because he's invisible and he hides from you. He has places called the secret place. He has things called the mysteries that have been hidden from man. So God's hiding from you. Hello. Because God wants you to seek him, but he set a time. How many of you know God will make himself found by you when it's the right time? Now, being God, he sets you in to a period called the 21st century, but he sets a time before you can find him. Now, in that process, when we put ourselves in this process of thinking, God knows the time, so he knows when I'm going to get saved. I'm going to give you all the evidence. And he sets you in a period, which is, in our case, we're in, the 21st century. Hello? Yeah. So he puts us in this period, but he has a time. And how many of you know that there were other tragedies and desperate moments of your life you should have got saved? But wasn't time. Now, how many of you know you could have killed yourself, you could have ended yourself, you could have had that end of it, but it wasn't time, so God just put a shield up there and said, sorry, it ain't time. Because the bigger picture of God is that when you come in at the right time, a 5-year-old is just born, that your timing affects the future of the 5-year-old. Wow. Now, yet it is actually not far from you, each one of us. He's right there. He's right there, but he's hidden. He's right there, but he's hidden. He's right there, but he's hidden. Say it again with me. He's there, but he's hidden. Now, so God, follow this thought, God predetermines time and boundaries. How do you believe God's that massive, that understanding? The mind of God is that profound that he knows the time. Do you understand that? Now, when you were born, God already knew you from the foundation of the earth. When you were born, God already knew you. Now you got to get this. Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 5. But you got to get this. When you were born, God already knew you. He knew you before you got in the womb of your mother. You can't mess with God. You can't get a book to figure God out. You're never going to get smart enough to figure God out. But you must understand his word is the window of revelation so you might know who God is. Because you worship an unknown God. Now the Greeks were the philosophers of all time. Come on. They were the leaders of all philosophy. Yeah, Paul said, you worship a God you don't know. America worships a God it doesn't know. In the New Living Bible, Jeremiah 1:5 says, I knew you before I formed you. So we peek inside today with all of our tools of equipment, and we see this little smiley face or a little thing sucking its thumb, and we see it in there, and it's moving around, and there's a little dude in there just rolling around having fun. And we go, there it is. And we call it conception. We call it the beginning. And yet, we're still wrong. We're fighting over with abortionists where conception or a birth where life really takes hold. And we think it takes hold once they come out of the womb. What a joke. I used to have it. I don't have it anymore. There's a picture. You can look it up. A doctor 30 years ago who was an abortionist, he stopped after this moment. The mother was there. She was all prepped, ready to go, supposed to deliver the child. He's there, and a hand comes out and grabs his thumb, or his finger. Now, he's supposed to kill that baby. And the baby reached out of the womb and grabbed his hand. Messed him up. It was like, please don't do this. Whew. You hear me? So now you have this little thing inside. It's incubated. It's being developed and all that's going on. But come back to Jeremiah a minute. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. So erase him and come over here in the eons of time. God the Father, the Holy Spirit, and the Son are on the corner of nowhere, and they're conversing about the mysteries. And in the dialogue, they're talking about you. They're talking about, what was his name? Cameron? Camden? They're talking about Camden. But he ain't. They're talking about you, but you're not. And they're discussing you, what you would look like. We call God Father. Okay. Do you think a father would not have some, well, that's my boy. And so they're there, and they're discussing what's not yet in the womb. And then in the process, they have this ability, the Godhead does, to say, let's see the beginning from the end. Oh, so the camera of their mind goes, and there they are, out of the womb, 82 years old, and they passed away. Back here, they're not even formed yet. And God says, oh, I know the time. The Holy Ghost says, tell me when the time is. And so they talk for a minute, and Jesus says, not yet, because I must come so that when they are at the time, because his name is Billy, and because he's going to need to talk about me all over the world, and we'll get his last name lined up because it's going to be Graham. So when Billy is going to be born, I have to have already been on the earth and already brought him to me, so that when he stands before thousands, he's not just talking to an unknown God, but he's talking to a God he knows. Those of you that stayed home, may your TV go black. Now listen, are you following this? Now, before I knew you, I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb, before you were born. Now he says something else. I set you apart. I set you apart. How many of you know that you have things in your life, your world, your home, and you set them apart for special occasions? You may have a certain kind of candle or candles for birthday things, or you may have something else, and you will take it and say, I set that apart because I'm going to need it on this particular occasion. I have a tuxedo. I don't wear it, except, so I have it set apart. So God says to Jeremiah here, I knew you when I knew you before you were formed and before you got born. I set you apart. Oh, saints. And he said, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nation. Stop for a minute. He set him apart. He had to know that he was going to be a prophet at what period of time, to what nation. So he had to make sure. How many of you know Jeremiah today? And he comes in and he's weeping. We'd have said he has to be a snowflake. Because he's just weeping and he's just crying for America. But how many of you know that God said, no, I got a specific time and I have appointed him for that time. And it's a period of time to a people. Wow. How many of you get this? Now let me show you something. I talked to you about cycles. Told you I was going to talk about cycles. I'm going to talk about cycles for a couple of minutes. It's too big to even talk about. I could preach on this probably 6-7 months. That's how deep it is. I've been preaching on it. Some of you never even heard it. You come to meetings and you never hear, but I've been preaching on it for the last year, and I've been pulling pieces off of it like you do an onion. I've just been peeling pieces off, and I got them stuck around. Because when I'm preaching, a lot of times what I'm preaching and what I'm saying is not really what I'm going to preach, but it's what I have to preach at the moment, because what I'm going to preach is being cooked and that hasn't gotten ready yet. And it hadn't gotten ready yet because it's for a time. A young man's driving over a bridge in Brooklyn. He's driving over the bridge in Brooklyn. He's riding in his car. He's kind of just trying to find God. He's talking to God. He's just searching. Where are you at, Lord? What are you doing? What do you want me to do? You got to show me something, God. So the Lord has him get off the bridge and go to an area in New York called Harlem. So he gets off, drives off, goes to Harlem. He's riding down the street in Harlem, and the Lord says, stop, talk to that man on the corner. Pulls over, and by grace of God, there's a place to stop. Gets out, goes up to him, and says, excuse me, are you frustrated? The guy says, yeah, I am. Why would you ask me that? He said, are you looking for the place you're supposed to be? He said, yeah, I am. And he said, well, he goes, I'm here to tell you that God spoke to your grandfather, who's now dead, and said that there would be a seed from his loins that would plant a church in Harlem. Well, the guy's eyes are big as saucers. He says, first, who are you? Why are you doing this? I'm nobody. Just was praying and hearing God today. Better yet, who are you? He said, my name, told his first name, is Wilkerson. And he said, my grandfather who's dead was David Wilkerson. And the boy broke crying and today has a church in Harlem because his grandfather, prophesied. Do you know that boy, that guy in the car, had to come at an exact time that couldn't be interrupted by stoplights, by traffic jams, by any natural thing, because God said it at a time, told an old man who's a great prophet who's died, he would have a seed that would plant a church, and the boy won't even born. Now the boy's born, and he's looking, and God sends a man with the word at a time from a period and says, this is the time and this is the period of that word for you. Wow. Can you hear this? Man. Now, we know he knew you. He knew when to put you in the earth and to connect you to the cycle of generations. I'm going to introduce you to this word here a little bit. He knows one person in your bloodline. He knows when one person in your bloodline dies. And you begin to lead in the cycle of your bloodline or your tribe. I'll unfold that. So when you look at death from the perspective of God's timing, you can view death from a place of celebration. Because something has to die many times before something can be. A seed has to die and fall to the ground. Unless it does, it abides alone. So it has to die before it can be really born. Are you listening? Yeah. You know, when we came to this area, we came to Baltimore, we had no idea of the history of Baltimore in the way that we've learned it. I knew Baltimore because my dad piloted a tugboat, a large tugboat for an organization called Mary Chapman Scott. And they brought in massive ships and things to Baltimore Harbor from out in the Chesapeake Bay and all the way out in the ocean. My dad had an ocean-going tug. He was over, and that was a big beast. And he could bring in large ships, and he was navigated. They bring them into a certain point at the harbor, and then they have what's called the harbor pilots. And they grab the ship and take it from the tugboat, and they take it up and put it at the dock. It's a process. And my dad ran this tugboat for years. So he went from Norfolk, Virginia, where I was born, and he went to Baltimore. So I thought that was a marvelous thing, and I kind of, said, wow, that's pretty cool. My dad's been here. My dad was here. I'm here. Wow, that's kind of cool. Well, then one day when we had a real strong move of God here at the church, a young man discovered by going to Annapolis that there had been a man lived on this property in 1743. This is 200 acres that crossed over the Beltway and all the way over to Joppa Road. This is part of 200 acres. It went down into the valley. Back in those days, that was all water. Where Lock Raven High School was all underwater. The reason is because there was no dam. So that was all water, clogged land. But as the hill rose up, there was a piece of property over there, and the house that was connected to is still there. It's a big mansion. And that was part of 200 acres, and this piece where we're at is part of the 200 acres. We have that. We have a book on it, shows the land, shows the map, shows the whole thing. It's all been proven. There's a museum downtown Baltimore called the Robert Strawbridge Museum. Now, we found out that this man named Robert Strawbridge held prayer meetings on this property. He lived at a tenant house, and he was here, and he held prayer meetings here. He started the first Methodist church. We actually went to where it was started, not far from here. And we were part of a service there and kind of went through a ceremony of service of redigging a well. Only to find out that he had lived here in a tenant house. When we dug this property, somebody found a bag, an old leather bag with a bunch of coins in it. And they were Irish half pennies from 1941 to 1943. 17. And they were Irish coins. So we found a whole bag of them. We have some of them in the back room. Come to find out that this man, Robert Strawbridge, had prayed over this property. and prayed over this region. And one of his children started a home for battered women. Another one of his children had a burden to go to Liberia and reach out to the Liberians there in Africa and bring many of them back to the United States. When we came into this region, there were no black folks that lived in this area. No as in zero. And there sure wasn't a black church here. Hello. God has to wait a couple of 100 years to find somebody who didn't mind having a church that was ethically blended. But see, in the beginning from the end, when he was over here, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, he said, and they went through. When they backed up, they said, man, he's in drugs. He's going to be crazy. When he gets to go shot at, just knock the bullet out of the way. Okay, we're just going to keep him because we think, we believe, he won't have a problem that we want to make it an ethnic blended church. Frozen. So my embryo, my seed, was frozen. And one day, God said to my dad and my mother, make a boy. Boom, 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 they make a boy. Now here the boy is, and he already knew it. But here's the best part to learn. I said it a minute ago. He knows when one person in your bloodline dies and you begin to lead in the cycle of your bloodline, meaning your tribe. My parents both died. So when you look at death from the perspective of God's timing, you can view death from a place of celebration. There are too many premature deaths. And usually premature deaths have to do with a curse. And how many of you know that Satan wants to interrupt the cycle of the plan of God? So he has to wait like jump rope till he can walk into a particular bloodline and mess it up and disrupt the plan. That's why how many times did I flirt with death to get here? Hello. But a little woman, when I was 5 years old, began to pray for me. A little Methodist lady in my neighborhood. She began to intercede for me. And that interception broke something and interfered with something that Satan was trying to stop the cycle of God. I'll show you. I'll give you a quick little blip of some things to think about, and then I'm going to go right into the last piece. You still here? Here's a simplified life cycle. Here's a way to look at this life cycle in a simplified way. Conception. We talked about it. Conception, and then number 2, physical birth. The next one, age of accountability. Come on, this is just the cycle of life. You get born, you get birth, then you go into an age of accountability, and then there's a rebirth. We're talking about Christian. And then there's a time next that you start receiving hope. And then there's a time of your faith getting matured. And then there's a time that you begin to demonstrate your faith. And then there's a time when you begin to manifest the reason you're here. And then there's a time that's the completion. You're done. And we all have to get to those, through those pieces and to the end, because God never made something he didn't already determine the end. And for you to get to the end, you have to realize demonic interceptions want to interfere with the bloodline to keep you from getting to the end. What did Jesus say when he died? It's finished. See, because he got to the manifestation level, and then he came to the completion. It's done, he said. It's finished. If you are born again, Satan will try to remove your hope for the future. To do this, he has to break through your life cycle in some way to divert the blessing of God that God had planned for your family, for your life. So when you're going through this stage, you can't get your conception, you didn't get aborted. Can't get you at birth, okay. Brings you into an age of accountability. You start being accountable, 12 years old and so. All of a sudden, he gets you born again. You're born again. Now you're in the receiving faith realm, and this is where he wants to step in. He wants to stop the cycle that's connected to generations. Come on now. And he wants to divert the blessing of God that God's planned for your life. Oh, you're going to like this. Some of you are going to be uncomfortable, but stay with me. Now, this is how iniquity begins to form in your bloodline. You know, it'd be one thing if Satan just came up and killed you or took you out. But how many of you know that's harder than you think? It's harder to die than you think. You live by fear of death, but death's harder to get to than you think. We have a friend, got saved, got to this place of hope, had children, was moving up in ministry, took a gun one day, put it inside of his head. He had a business, a well drilling business, shot his head. Boom, blew a hole in the side of his head. Went to the hospital, they did the surgery, he couldn't die. He's still alive today. Blew the side of his skull off, bone, everything gone. But he couldn't die. And we went in there and he just said, I give up. I can't even kill myself. It became kind of a joke because he couldn't die. I'll be here. Whitney Houston tried to kill herself a bunch of times. I could take you through some celebrities that tried and tried and tried and tried. How many of you know death is not as easy as you think? Hello? Guy lands a plane in the New York harbor for U.S. Air and saves everybody. Now, out of everybody in that plane, you don't think somebody was at the point where they should have? Death is harder to get to than you can imagine. But here's what happens. Satan doesn't want to kill you. He wants to infect your bloodline. Because if you get through the cycle of maturing faith, demonstration, manifestation, and the completion, he lost. He lost with you. Now, here's the best illustration I can give you. 4:6. This is where Cain and Abel are living on the earth, and Adam, and Eve, she got pregnant, and she gave a son named Cain, and then she had another son named Abel. Now, verse 6 says something. And the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Look at that. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Now, Ephesians 4:26 says, when angry, do not sin. Do not let that anger, don't ever let your wrath last until the sun goes down. Here's what God is saying. God put a time on your allowed sin. And when you carry that sin past his time, he lets demonic forces intercept it and begin to affect your bloodline. And so your whole bloodline is affected to go in a direction. That's called iniquity. That's how your iniquity is transferred to your children's children's children. When you get angry and you hold bitterness and you hold unforgiveness, God has a set time. He can't let the sun go down means don't let it go down. Sun had to do with your clock. Don't let that wrath get to the end where it now is a part of your bloodline. And when it gets to the end and it's a part of your bloodline, everything you produce will have it in the bloodline. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And then Ephesians says, don't let it go down. So now God's showing us, saints, and I could apply this to a lot of areas of iniquity. I just chose this one. Do you understand? So when you let bitterness, unforgiveness, and that go on inside of you, God says, push the clock. And now there's a timer. And God says, I'm going to let it go till you get to the end of that time I allotted. When you get to it, he says, there's no more. Now your bloodline is open, and you're going to cause the next generation behind you to transfer it and carry it, and it keeps going until it gets worse, worse, and worse. If you don't know what iniquity is, there's three kinds of sin. There's sin, which every man is guilty of. We were all born sinners. That's your action deeds. And then there is transgressions. Transgressions are after you know to do good and you still keep doing it. You just transgressed against the law, against God's word. But iniquity is the sin. That's why when Moses put blood on the doorpost, he put it on three parts, the header and the two sides. He applied the blood of the lamb to protect his family because he dealt with iniquity, he dealt with transgressions, and he dealt with his personal sin. And what happens is, iniquity is that which is transferred through your bloodline that's feeding into your children and your children's children because you decide you're not going to change. And God's gave you a clock. God gave you a clock. How many of you listening? Now, I want to go a little further with this. So this example, there's a time limit on your anger sin before the enemy can take you out of time. Notice that I'm still dealing with cycles and time. When you come to the end of the time of not letting God have that, you now let Satan interrupt your time. Because see, he can't affect your bloodline unless he gets into your timeline. Now this is what opens the door into your soul for demonic activity, such as depression, etc., to interfere with your timing, and it breaks your God cycle. When you're a born-again believer and you're flowing in God and there's things happening and you open that door, God sets the clock because it's a time you've either stepped into at the time of the manifestation, time of the hope, some part, and you're all of a sudden made the clock available to Satan to stick his wedge in there and stop the clock. And now the effects are really detrimental. Because that's when, left alone, you come to the end and you die and you didn't fulfill what you were supposed to. Moses had an event. Do you know Moses had an anger problem? Sorry. Moses had an anger problem. We first meet Moses, well, not first, but after we meet him, he's over in Egypt. He just gets ticked off at some Egyptian and kills him. Thinks it's going to make everybody like him. That's like politicians. They think they're going to get liked by doing something stupid. And so then we find him later, he's mad. So he smacks the rock. Let me tell you something. If you're walking in the desert and a rock is rolling along behind you and water's just flowing out of it like a fountain, I wouldn't be hitting that. You're not smart. What are you doing hitting a rock? It didn't have a name. It didn't ask you anything. You moved and it moved. You moved and it moved. And the people said, I'm thirsty. Oh my God. And you're going to go over there and you're going to hit it? That's called being dumb. Some of you hit the very mouthpiece of God that's trying to feed you, that's trying to bring you resource of water and nourishment, and you hit it with your mouth. Notice Genesis 4:26. I'm still there. You still with me? Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? Boy, needed a facelift. Why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? Your face begins to affect your emotions that are incorrect. Verse 7. Go to verse 7. Then he says, then if you do well, will you not be accepted? Hello? Have you heard that? So God's talking to him about what he can do to change it. Go to verse 5. Because I didn't tell you deliberately. Why did all this happen? Because Cain had a problem with giving. See, the clock went on. I announced it last week, and Satan made sure certain people didn't get here. So you better realize your coming to church is not based on you thinking you want to or not. It's based on your lack of prayer, your lack of knowing God's voice, and him able to deceive and trick you on a regular basis so that you don't hear the word. But anyway, it's interesting. And yet I'm not going to really talk about money here because it's not, I want you to see. It's referred to as a first fruits offering. The Jewish calendar calls it Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh. It is the first fruits calendar. So the whole issue came out of verse 5. God says, if you decide to worship me the way I'm worthy to be worshiped, you'll be accepted just as Abel was. Amen. So the whole issue of allowing Satan to disrupt Cain's cycle of life was broken, interrupted, because he kept the first fruits that belong to God. My Lord. Do you know that God brings you to a place that you could change the circumstances of your life? And because you hold back from giving God first fruits, that first fruits there is talking about they gave the very first thing. They gave the first fruits of their lips. They gave the first fruits of their field. They gave the first fruits of their animals. They gave that to the Lord. Do you understand? Abel did that. Cain did not. So Cain died. Hello? Cain killed Abel, but Cain died. I'll be here. Now, Cain interrupted Abel's flow, the cycle, and God, you have to do this own study on your own. God redeemed Abel's bloodline. Yet he died early. But he died at the hands of a man and not at the hand of God. Cain died at the hand of God. And if you read it, he built cities that we still suffer from today. Because the first city that ever was built in the Bible, the first city was ever built and recorded in Scripture, Cain built it. What was the primary root in that new city? Murder. If you want to read it, music was defined in that first city. Industry started in that first city. Houses were established, or dwellings, huts were first established in that city. Everything that we know about a city came out of the root of that. Wow. So when I see Chicago and cities that are, Baltimore cities that struggle with this whole thing of murder constantly, come on. All they are is they're still following in the cycle that got broke. And it's never, that iniquity has never been dealt with, and it's still being transferred right down the line. First fruits can reverse iniquity. This is why so many people and families suffer from rejection. Because God robbing is in their bloodline. When God robbing is in your bloodline, you'll always feel like you're being rejected or you're less than worthy. Would you hear this today? Because I'm going to blow your mind in about a second. I got a piece of dynamite. It's been lit. I'm about to throw it in the audience. Now, this is the reason. First fruits giving can reverse your iniquity bloodline that stopped your clock and got you offline. And so many, when there's a spirit that comes on them from this, it is the spirit of rejection. And it's because in God robbing, they got that rejection in their bloodline. So this explains that when you step forward into freedom, Satan is there to try to knock you out of your place. Have you hear that? Satan wants to knock you out of your place every opportunity he can, because if you stay in your place, you'll stay in the cycle of his intended plan he's already set from the beginning of time. See, every day I get up in my life today, I get up with the knowledge that he already set it up. And he protected me before I was even aware that he was protecting me. How much more now do I know he's guiding my steps every day? And so all the more, I'm not going to let anger or bitterness or some other thing get inside of me. My clock's not going to run out with me having that, so my bloodline gets contaminated. Now, this usually manifests through rejection and rebellion. I just told you that. Rebellion is always the twin sister to rejection. Hello? When somebody rejected you, a mother, father, it sows a seed in your life of rebellion. When you're operating in lawlessness, you can't submit, you can't align yourself with his purpose in your life. How do you know my chiropractor knows what alignment is? My car dealership knows what alignment is. God wants to teach his children what alignment is. When you're operating in lawlessness, you can't submit, you can't align yourself with his purpose in your life. Satan comprehends time better than we do. Hello. Saints, I'm going to tell you something. a thing that'll help you understand. Slaves come away with a contamination in their bloodline. You know what it is? Those people took something from me, so they owe me. What affects the cities of America today is a generation times generation times generation that keeps saying, somebody owes me something. And it paralyzes a people that could be the most creative, the most talented, the most awesome people on the earth, but they've been paralyzed by a contaminated bloodline that got them to the place that all they were mad at was the clock ran out on them saying, they owe me. You know, that's what's killing the future in America. The artists, the singers, the dancers, the doctors, those talented people that are shot on a regular basis are in the bloodline of those that the clock ran out, and they have an attitude, somebody owes me something, and because it's owed to me, I'm going to go get it. And it's ruining generations until somebody pleads the blood. Until somebody pleads the blood and cleanses the blood and cleanses the bloodline and begins to stop talking about my days in slavery and gets over it and begins to realize that they were created for something bigger. But along the line, Satan got in the moment, stopped the cycle of their purpose, and they've been stuck there contaminating the blood because the clock ran out of their moment to say, get over it and let's live for God. Verse 7 back. If you don't do well, sin lives at your door. And its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. What does it say? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. Here's what it is. It's Moses' door. The lion is sitting right outside. So when you go into the mode of just doing your thing and you open the door, the lion eats you. I saw a funny thing the other day. Two couples had their cars up in the mountains somewhere in Rhode Island or somewhere. And they're up there having one wonderful time. They came back and a bear had gotten one of the cars. It was tearing the headliner out, tearing the car all to pieces, eating everything around. And they wanted to get him out. So they drove the car up close, and the guy had to get out of the car and open the door to let the bear out. But when he opened the door, the bear could eat him. And the video was really funny of him. He opened the door and the door closed. Opened the door and the door closed. The bear kept closing it. How do you know? You open the door in life. You open the door in life. And you have unrepented things in your life and iniquities that have been transferred, and you carry them on into your generation. When you step out your door, when your children step out of the loins of your womb and they step into the door of America or the world that they're to live in, the lion is there to get them. Wow. Remember, giving and giving first fruits, giving all the glory to God, is what kills iniquity. How you say, Lord, I need to kill some iniquity. In these last days, it's clear to see the entire nation has adopted the spirit of Cain. But by recognizing how this spirit of Satan breaks the cycle of God's intended purpose to bless Cain, like Abel, we can learn how to rule over sin and cleanse our bloodline from past iniquities. God put markers in the sky in our lives to know his days, his seasons, and his years. Genesis 1:14 tells you, let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons, days, and years. Now, he tells us in the book of Acts, Paul defined it, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods, boundaries, their dwelling place. How you know God sets your boundaries, sets your time? He sets those things. And the boundaries are what he's already allotted for you to do. Wow. He puts markers in the sky, tells us the seasons and days. We must learn the importance of aligning ourselves with his timing. Come on. How do you know it's time for the church to be blessed? It's time for you to get a hold of God. It's time for you to break the cycle that Satan keeps interrupting your moving forward. Some of you let things get in the cycle of God, and when God had the cycle going to clock, and some of you escape by the hair of your chinny chin chin. You run to the altar at that last tick of the clock, and you redo this thing, but you're causing your time to be expended. God placed 12 tribes in and around a very strong magnetic field called the tabernacle. You see that picture? God set the tribes around a magnetic field called the tabernacle. And after time, they were all different tribes. Judah was different. Naphtali was different. Gad was different. Issachar was different. They were all different. But because the magnet drew them together, they all became like the magnet. They all became one with the one who drew them together. Are you hearing me? And God, in his infinite wisdom and purposes, has put in us the ability to understand that if we put our lives in the cycle of God and let our tribe become part of the magnet, all of a sudden we are drawn into the purpose of God. And the purpose of God will not be fought off or beat off or pushed away by the demonic forces, because the magnet kept them together. Have you say, Lord, the molecules are going to be different, because the glory of God coming in the house of God, his presence, sitting in the Word. The Word causes an effect to happen so that you don't let that demonic thing interrupt your cycle. And it gets discerned, and prophecy comes, and the word of the Lord comes, and it tries to set us in motion and put us together, so that the magnetic force of the presence of God is what keeps drawing us. And once we become a nation, look at Israel. Look at Israel. They today are unlike any other nation. Do you know the Jewish population in America? 60-70% are over the banks. 40 to 50% are over all of Hollywood. And I could do that for the rest of the day in telling you that God preserved them as a people, because when the clock was about to ran over, they began to repent. They removed the iniquity, and they've kept themselves always about the magnet who is God. And because of it, he's kept them as a nation through everything they've gone through. Hitler tried to kill them, and he couldn't do it. Have you know, Iran's not going to be able to do it. Syria's not going to be able to do it. Do you hear me? Why? Because they've put themselves close to the magnet, and now the magnet is transferred to them, and they've become like the magnet. Have you say, Lord, keep me in the magnet? Have you hear the magnet? Have you know the magnet is right here, saints? How do you know when you come into the house of God and you stay in the house of God, then the discernment of God, the operations of the gifts of God, all of those things begin to work on your behalf. So when your cycle of life is going along, there's no way for Satan to get in there and disrupt you and take your life ahead of time. I was in Switzerland years ago, and my wife and I was at a conference that I had to speak at. And a very dear friend of mine in this church died. And it angered me. Because then I said at the time, had I been there, they wouldn't have died. You say, what an arrogant statement. Uh-uh. You see, God gives gifts to men so that we can discern when Satan has put a little block in your time frame and trying to block you from growing and going forward and being used of God. And we can discern it and we can prophesy, speak the word of the Lord to you. We can interrupt the divine plans of Satan and turn it over to the divine plan of God, where God cannot take you until you finish your purpose. But see, the church don't understand covering. It don't understand biblical covering. It don't understand the power that's available to keep us under the magnet, under the glory. So that when we're just doing our little life and we go along, we get into a place and all of a sudden, Bishop says, hey, don't do that. Stop doing that. Come over here. I need to talk to you. What are you doing? Oh, that's just Bishop. And you know what it is? I see Satan fooling with your clock, and he's going to put something in the cycle of blessing that God has started in your life. And when I see it, then I or others will speak the word of the Lord, and it interrupts the cycle. Are you hearing me? That's why I stayed under a pastor, because my pastor stopped me. My pastor saved me. Jesus said, my pastor saved my life. I'll never forget the day I quit. Had my hat on, was running backhoe, threw it in the ground. I said, I'm out of here. I'm done. And I looked behind me, there was little patent leather shoes on. He's coming with me. I said, what are you doing? I'm leaving. So I'm going with you. You're not going with me. No, you quit. I quit. I'm done. I'm over. Let's go. Come on. Come on, you drive. And I stopped. I said, stop it. You can't leave. He turned around, and that Puerto Rican's nose opened up, and his eyeballs began to come like fire, and his little short, little stubby body bristled all of a sudden. He came right back up to me. He said, Pierce, you can't quit either. Get back on that backhoe. I got my hat, dusted it, put it back on. And it saved my life. Do you understand? The clock is moving on some of you because you have something in your heart that you've let get in there and stay in there. And your day, the sun's going to set on that moment. And when it sets on that moment, there's not going to be grace to stop that thing from the pollution that's coming out of Satan to give your bloodline an infection so that you're going to pass it on to your next, to next, to the next. Stand with your feet. I'm going to pray for you. Have you heard the word today? Yes. Have you understand the power of breaking cycles? Yes. I showed you how he broke the cycle. Cain could have broke it if he gave. Isn't that right? Yes. Cain could have broke it if he gave. How many of you know giving first fruits, give God glory today? Come on. Yes. Raise your hand. Raise your heart, your head, your mouth. Give God some praise for a minute. Just really give him some praise and say, God, I thank you. I thank you, Lord. I thank you, Lord. When I wasn't looking, when I wasn't paying attention, you sent somebody. You sent a pastor. You sent a prophet. And you stopped me. You stopped me, Lord. You put something in the thing to stop that clock. And you stopped Satan from being able to deceive me and trick me and knock me off course and put an infection in my bloodline. By the blood of Jesus, may you be healed. May you be cleansed. Pray with me, pray with me, pray with me. Father, I bless your people today. Let the canopy of grace override their hearts. Let them understand today, God, that in the spirit realm, the enemy has done everything he could do to stop the clock and stop the flow of blessing. What that means to a woman, it means that you're not going to be able to produce. You know, when the flow and thing stops, you know, when all that gets over with, you can't be pregnant. You can't, you know. But I'm here to tell you that's a lie from the pit of hell. There ain't no age limit on the multiplying anointing of God. And God is going to cause some of you that thought it was a dried up womb. You're going to begin to get pregnant with the glory, the joy, the power, the anointing of God. You're going to begin to feel the life of God flow into you. And you're going to begin to tell the devil, get the hell out of here, because God's for me. You have no right to harass me. You have no right to rob me of the generations of the loins of my life. My seeds are coming back. My seeds are coming back. My seeds of inheritance. Oh God, they're coming back. They're coming back. Rejoice, O ladies of Zion. This would be the right atmosphere. This would be the right moment to come and get prayer and get it right. So I give you this moment. If you know that you need to get things settled so that you can get your bloodline cleansed, if you know that there's that rejection and that thing has opened up bitterness and opened up rebellion and things in your life, if that's you, let's deal with it today. Let's get past it, and so you can get a hold of the plan of God. If that's you, let's pray together right now. Right now. So if you're here today and you know you need to get your heart right and your life right with God, run down here and I'll pray with you. Just get down here to the front and I'll pray with you. Come down real quick. Just come real quick. Just say, it's me, Pastor, it's me. Father, in the name of Jesus, put your hands out this way and pray. In the name of Jesus, I pray, Lord, right now for those that have come here today. I pray for those that have come here today that, Lord, you will take this thing off. And that device of Satan out of rejection that's birthed rebellion, I pull it out like you would a thorn. I pull it out of their spiritual system. I extract it today. I grab a hold of it in the name of Jesus and I pull it out. I pull it out. Mark, walk by and make your hand like you're pulling out an arrow and pull the arrow out of every single one of them. Act like it in faith. It's a step of faith. Pull it out and throw it to the ground. You got to realize you really have one. Pull it out in the name of Jesus. I loose this thing. I loose this thing. It's coming out of you right now. 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 Now, in the name of Jesus. Oh, it's coming out. It's there. It's there. Let go, let go, let go, let go, let God, let God, let God. Let God, let God, let God do it. Let God.